The most recent set of revelations regarding the Wilder versus Joshua conversation, the most recent set of revelations made by Eddie Hearn, the most recent set of revelations disclosed certain information that wasn't available before. Just what exactly was Eddie Hearn sending Deontay Wilder in terms of an offer? What exactly was he sending him? And was it a real offer? Because what most people aren't realizing, or at least what doesn't seem to be divulged across the board, is that well after the first set of negotiations fizzled out, Team Joshua was still sending out offers. And what I want to preface everything I'm about to say with is this. This is not an LDBC channel. This is not a new media channel. We don't just look at what Team Wilder says and agree with it. And we don't just look at what Team Joshua says and agree with it. We look at both sides of the spectrum to get to the truth. Because that's the whole point of it, getting to the truth. It just so happens that Eddie Hearn claimed this whole time, and we've been talking about it month by month, week by week, whatever. We've been talking about it. It just so happens that Eddie Hearn, well after the first set of negotiations fizzled out, he claimed that they were sending Deontay Wilder new offers, improved offers. Now, we didn't know exactly what the numbers for those offers were. We didn't know what they were, but what we did know is Eddie Hearn was saying he was sending those offers. And we also know that those offers being sent, that is corroborated by Shelly Finkel. That the offers were in fact sent. At minimum, the offers did get sent. It's just that Shelly Finkel and Team Wilder, they weren't receptive to them at the time that they received them.
The new offer that we sent, 65-35, plus the guarantee. It was a guaranteed two-way fight. Okay? So if Wilder lost, we still do fight 2 in America. If Wilder won, we still do fight 2 in America. And I might as well just tell you the numbers now. If Wilder lost in the first fight, he would get 70-30 in the second fight. So he'd get another crack with just 5% less. If he won that, it would be a 50-50 fight in America. Right? That was the offer. From then, now, we're increasing that offer. We'll go to 60-40 for that fight. No problem. But I can't honestly, like, when someone isn't replying to you, or just saying, okay, we're getting there, or we don't like your offer, why don't you give us this? We're not even getting told what to offer, or what they're not happy with. Do you know what I mean? So, all I know is that we made an offer they accepted. It never got done. No problem, that happens a lot. Then we improved it. Then we improved it again. But like I see like Lennox Lewis, you know, I ran at him in the week. He's like, why don't you just offer him a percentage split, 70-30? It's like, we did that months ago. 65-35, done that. 60-40, we'll do that. But they don't want, like, these people, they want to fight Joshua, but only if the deal is too good to be true.
So at what point do these people in the quote-unquote new media, at what point do these people in the LDBC, at what point do they tell themselves that their pony in the show is just being unreasonable? Because they've actually gone as far as guaranteeing Deontay Wilder not just the fight itself, but a second fight in his backyard.
That's not what he wanted?
In the event of both eventualities, if he were to win the first fight, or if he were to lose the first fight. Is that or is that not what he was asking for?
According to him, it was.
It seems that they have gone as far as accommodating some of the gripes that Deontay Wilder had ahead of the first set of negotiations. It seems that they've actually accommodated his requests, his problems with the first set of negotiations, and even then, Team Wilder was not receptive to the deal.
Is that what you wanted?
You know, myself, I didn't even think they were going to go as far as accommodating some of those requests, that he get a guarantee that there will be a second fight even if he loses. I didn't think that that was very likely to happen, because if they beat you the first time, well, thank you, you know, nice doing business with you. That's how I thought it might have went. But they went as far as accommodating his request that in the event that he lose, he still get another crack at Anthony Joshua. They've gone as far as accommodating that, and yet Deontay Wilder is still unreceptive.
The most frustrating thing is, I don't even get a reply or a conversation from Wilder's team. You know, if we talk here about 60-40 for Deontay Wilder, do you really think that's a terrible offer? Or an offer that doesn't even warrant a conversation? So, I think, at the end of the day, Al Haymon doesn't want this fight. Because Al Haymon is aligned to Showtime and Fox. And there is a situation that this fight the people that would pay the most money for this fight, the most guaranteed money, is DAZN. Al Haymon for Deontay Wilder to go on DAZN is an absolute nightmare for him. Nightmare. And I don't blame him for that, because I've been in a similar situation in my past where I don't want a DAZN fighter to go on Showtime or Fox. People say, "Oh, that's bad for the sport." Mate, that's business. Do you think Bob Arum wants Lomachenko to go on Fox? We've got a purse bid with Lomachenko against Crolla. If that goes to purse bid and I win, Lomachenko's on DAZN for that fight. That's a nightmare for Top Rank and ESPN. That happens, and we may get a position in time where Joshua goes to a purse bid and he goes on Showtime or something like that. That's just the business. But you can't say that Al Haymon wants Deontay Wilder to box Joshua on DAZN. Of course he doesn't. It doesn't have to be on DAZN. I'm just saying that they will pay more money than anybody else. So when we look at the financials of the show, when there's a split of a show and there's two fighters owning the financials of a show, the job of a promoter is to maximise the revenue for a fighter. So who's going to pay the most money? It's pretty strict.
I heard you say that Joshua could fight on other platforms if
Yes.
it's a bidding war to get him.
Yes.
So is it a possibility that we could get it a split, like something like Mayweather Pacquiao on DAZN and
but the
on
problem is
Showtime?
when you've got one pay-per-view platform and one subscription platform, you're paying. If Joshua Wilder lands on DAZN, you get it for free as part of your subscription for $9.99 a month. If it lands on Showtime, you're paying $100 for that one fight.
And we're supposed to believe that these aren't agreeable terms? We're supposed to believe based on the conjecture of the quote-unquote new media. We're supposed to believe based on the conjecture of the LDBC that these aren't agreeable terms even though they meet the requests that Wilder was asking for. Or that at minimum, if they're not agreeable terms, at least they're good enough terms that warrant a conversation. That you know what, based on this, we need to start talking, because this sounds like a pretty good deal.
Let's look into it.
And you're telling me that no, none of this is good enough. It's not good enough because they stand to make so much more with Tyson Fury.
You on drugs?
Let me fill you in on a little secret. The Deontay Wilder versus Tyson Fury pay-per-view was a mild success. At minimum, you have to call it a mild success because nobody lost any money, right? It managed to not only break even, but come in a little over that. Not much more, but a little over that, and that's good. That means that at minimum, nobody lost any money, and in that way, it is a success. Just as well, it's a respectable debut. Respectable.
Good first time out.
It's a respectable debut for two guys that have never been on pay-per-view in the American market. So in that way, yes, it's good. But in terms of dollars and cents, which is really what this is all about, in terms of dollars and cents, the Deontay Wilder versus Tyson Fury pay-per-view, which was priced at $75 a buy, if it did as good as its projected sales estimates, if it really did in fact do 325,000 buys in the American market, that only gives you about $24,375,000. Roughly $24 million. The fight seems like it's a lot bigger than it actually was in terms of dollars and cents because a whole lot of people stole the fight, whole lot of people streamed it, whole lot of people were talking about it. But in terms of finance, in terms of actual revenue generated from pay-per-view buys, the fight brought in about $24 million. Now you compare that $24,375,000 that was generated by that pay-per-view to the pay-per-view of a much less talked about fight, a fight that really wasn't a big fight. Stateside, a lot of people weren't really clamoring for it or looking for it or checking for it, It wasn't as talked about a fight as the Fury-Wilder fight, and yet somehow it still brought in more revenue, significantly more revenue than that fight. And I'm talking about the Joshua versus Joseph Parker fight. That fight pulled in roughly 1.4 million pay-per-view buys domestically. 1,457,000, which comes out to basically 1.5 if you round up. Now this pay-per-view is obviously at the going rate for pay-per-views in the UK, which is substantially less than what people are paying here. It's approximately $25 once you apply the conversion rate. But that pay-per-view pulled in approximately somewhere between $36 million and $37 million. That is substantially more than what Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder pulled here in the American market. So what you've got to ask yourself now is if that many people across the Atlantic were interested in seeing Anthony Joshua fight Joseph Parker, who has the personality of warm oatmeal, how many more do you think would be interested in seeing him fight Deontay Wilder for the undisputed heavyweight championship of the world? How many more homes do you think would buy that fight? How many more people do you think would show up to that fight? And what I'm getting at here is that the potential revenue earnings from a Joshua fight substantially outweigh anything you stand to make with Fury in a rematch. In other words, in layman's terms, Joshua will always be the bigger fight, in spite of what the LDBC thinks about it, in spite of what the new media thinks about it, and in spite of what Frank Warren thinks about it. There are people out there who want to exaggerate the magnitude, the overall scale of the Fury versus Wilder fight, the first one and the proposed rematch, because they want to mirror the success that Joshua had with Klitschko. But the reality of it is, this fight is nowhere near as big as that fight was, not in terms of scale, size, and overall revenue generated. It's not that kind of a fight. It's not that big of a fight. This fight isn't on the scale of Joshua versus Parker, not in terms of the revenue that got generated. Nevertheless, there are people who's running around saying that the Joshua fight is the second fiddle fight, and the Fury and Wilder fight, the rematch, oh, that's a bigger fight. Yeah, on what planet, man? On what planet? Maybe it's the bigger fight with the streaming crowd that doesn't want to have to pay for anything. Maybe it's a bigger fight with them, but if that's the only crowd, and it appears to be that that's the crowd that the fight is biggest with. The guys that don't actually want to have to pay to see the fight, because if you look at the Forbes report on just how many people stole this fight, how many recorded illegal streams were documented.
Millions!
We're talking about numbers in the millions. Approximately 10 million worldwide. Oh yeah, that means there's a lot of interest for the fight, but that doesn't represent anything in terms of revenue generated. So maybe that's the bigger fight with the guys that don't want to pay for shit. But with the people that actually do want to pay for shit, Joshua, that would be the fight to go with.
You must understand the scam that you argue with on YouTube and Facebook and in the comments of Instagram. The scam that wants to have an opinion on the matters aforementioned. They mean nothing in terms of dollars. They mean nothing in terms of the scale and the size and the revenue that could be generated had they not had such tight wallets.
You can sit there talking about how this is a much bigger audience than over there in the UK. You can sit here talking about that shit all day. And you can sit here talking about historical precedences and other fights that don't even involve the fighters aforementioned as some kind of a talking point as to what could happen in this market. But the reality of it all is, in this market, and the way that it's become, the pay-per-view market and the pay-per-view model, Manny Pacquiao just had a fight with Adrian Broner, two very popular guys in the United States of America, and yet their fight didn't do much better than Wilder and Tyson Fury. And Wilder and Tyson Fury are not pay-per-view attractions in this country and in this market. So what does that say about the market when the only difference between what was a bona fide pay-per-view attraction and a highly polarized fighter? What does that say about the market when the discrepancy between their pay-per-views is only a sum of about 75,000 buys? And you guys somehow think that there's more value here than there? Oftentimes when you discuss this subject with a lot of Deontay Wilder's fans, you hear the same regurgitated bullshit. The same second-hand regurgitated bullshit that they got from a lot of guys who resemble cult leaders. They don't want you to see things for what they are. They're just trying to get into your mind and convince you of things. They'll tell you that Eddie Hearn lied about stuff, even though they really can't tell you what he lied about. They'll tell you that Anthony Joshua and his whole team, they contradict themselves. Is that right? They contradict themselves? You want to hear some contradictions? Here are some contradictions.
My thing is, Eddie always talking about building the profile to hype this fight up.
Yeah.
Free advertisement.
Yeah.
Then that fight right there, I don't think they want this fight, They definitely begging now. He's trying to reach out all of a sudden now. His management has been, trying to reach out to mines as well.
Now we're increasing that offer. We'll go to 60-40 for that fight, no problem. But I can't honestly, when someone isn't replying to you or just saying, okay, we're getting there, or we don't like your offer, why don't you give us this? We're not even getting told what to offer or what they're not happy with. Do you know what I mean?
He's trying to reach out all of a sudden now. His management has been, trying to reach out to mines as well.
All I want to do is prove that I am the best. That's all I want to do. I don't care about nothing else. I don't care about the fame. I don't care about none of that. None of that that's irrelevant to this sport when it comes to the best fighting the best. When do we start caring about the social media followers? When do we start caring about money and shit because
It's gonna be 50-50 straight across. I'm not accepting no flat fees. Yeah. No, none of that.
money and shit because
I'm not accepting no flat fees. Yeah. No, none of that.
We'll go to 60-40 for that fight. No problem. But I can't honestly, like, when someone isn't replying to you or just saying, okay, we're getting there, or we don't like your offer, why don't you give us this? We're not even getting told what to offer or what they're not happy with. Do you know what I mean? I think at the end of the day, Al Haymon doesn't want this fight because Al Haymon is aligned to Showtime and Fox. And there is a situation that this fight, you know, the people that would pay the most money for this fight, the most guaranteed money, is DAZN. Al Haymon, for Deontay Wilder to go on DAZN, is an absolute nightmare for him. Nightmare.
Now, remove your rooting interests and ask yourself a question. Is that the first time you ever heard something like that said about Al Haymon? Is that the first time you ever heard that Al Haymon might be blocking a fight because he doesn't want his guy fighting under some other banner? Thus, he would prefer to block the fight than to let it go through. Because at this point, from a purely fiscal perspective, if we're just talking finance, because lest we forget, this is prize fighting. So prizes have a lot to do with what goes on. But from a purely financial perspective, the Joshua fight is the bigger fight. Just from a prize fighting perspective, from a financial perspective, from a legacy perspective, it also just so happens to still be the bigger fight. Because whoever wins that fight between Joshua and Wilder is going to be the next undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. And we haven't seen one of those in that division in a very long time. So in terms of finance and in terms of legacy, we know which fight is the more relevant fight. Understand that people were not sitting around arguing with each other day in and day out over Wilder versus Fury. The fight that had each other at their wits' end, and still does, is Wilder versus Joshua. So we know which is the fight that is of the greater value, and yet Eddie Hearn is of the opinion that Haymon might be blocking it. You know that we got two other examples of that don't even involve Deontay Wilder, right? The Vasyl Lomachenko fight with Mikey Garcia. The Errol Spence fight with Terrence Crawford. Very similar situations. So what you have to start asking yourself if you have a functioning brain cell is, could all these different people be wrong? Could all these different people be lying? Or is it just as simple as it sounds because the proof is already in the pudding?
Haymon's blocking it.
That Al Haymon might just be blocking this fight, and that's why, you know, even though it doesn't make much sense to prioritize Fury over Joshua, that's what Wilder's doing, because Uncle Al doesn't want Wilder fighting on DAZN. DAZN is more likely to outbid everybody else that puts a bid out there for the fight. They are likely to win the bid. And it may be for that reason that, you know what, we're no closer to this fight than we were a couple of months ago. Because Haymon knows that, and Haymon's not going to let it happen.